So we're still on Seat of the Soul, Gary Zukav's remarkable spiritual book. This is the third part of a four-part series. And for those that haven't been here, you might know Gary through the Oprah show where he appeared 36 or so times. That may be the record, I think. But anyway, so largely out of the work that arose from this book, which was written 25 years ago. So in this section, the topics are choice, addiction, relationships, and soul, and the overall, or souls, and the overall title is responsibility. So as I've been doing, I can only take a narrow slice of each section, given the time we have and so forth. So let's see what I picked this week. On choice, he says, the center of the evolutionary process is choice. When you choose with each action and thought, what you choose with each action and thought is an intention, a quality of consciousness that you bring to your action and your thought. So the idea of intention is very important in our teaching and spirituality in general, because the intention is a combination of an idea and an emotion. An intention is something you intend to actually have happen. It's not the same as a fantasy or a daydream or wishful thinking. It's directed thinking toward a specific outcome, or at least a general sense of a quality of life. So you might intend to have good health. You might intend to have enough money to live your life the way you would choose. You might intend for there to be peace in the world. But without intention, nothing really happens, because otherwise the thoughts are just thoughts, and they have a certain creative energy to them, but not enough to really make a transformation or a change within us. It takes new thinking to generate new action and new activity and new responses. And we can go for a long time without changing our thinking. How long has the conflict in the Middle East been going on? Since Genesis, chapter 2. Chapter 1 was kind of mellow, and then chapter 2 they started fighting. And we've been going at it ever since. And it's not that thinking hasn't changed over time, but the thinking hasn't changed in a sufficient way to allow for the various people and the various identities that they have accepted for themselves to coexist. And in many cases, there is no intention to do that. The intention is quite the opposite. The intention is to get rid of the other. So how do you move through that? How do you move beyond that? And you can say, well, that's them. But some of us have that in our own families. I know my dad, he and his brother had a spat, and they didn't talk for the last 25 years of my dad's life. And my father would say, I have no intention of ever talking to him again. And when my dad was in hospice care, his brother reached out, called me, and said, would you see if your dad would let me visit him or talk on the phone? And I went to my dad and I said, your brother called and wants to talk. He said, no. He wasn't interested in that. So it can be very close to home, that kind of thing. We can look across and say, why can't they all get along? And then we can't get along. Maybe that's why. It says you cannot choose your intentions consciously until you become conscious of each of the different aspects of yourself. See, this is part of the issue why it's so important to understand how our minds work, our psychology, because so much of our motivation is subconscious. And there's so many things that we form intentions about that aren't consciously formed. They come out of our reactive self. And our reactive self is largely fear-based. So we go around spending a lot of our energy and our time and our time being concerned about, am I okay? Are the doors locked? Do I have enough money? Is so-and-so going to leave me? Kind of the inner Department of Defense is always on alert. You know, we're sending out reconnaissance things to spy on who's in our lives to see if they're being true to us, if we can trust them. We're waiting for someone to say the wrong thing so we can raise their consciousness. Now we do it on Facebook. I get my consciousness raised a lot on Facebook. No, it's this. But, you know, there's that kind of reactive self that just jumps on the wrong word or jumps on the wrong tone of voice or whatever. And that's not a conscious process. That's not something we've consciously decided to be. So unless we examine those elements of ourselves that Jung called complexes, a complex is simply a series of beliefs that have emotional triggers that we didn't intend to get, but we got them as we grew up. Some of them are shadows, some of them are other things. But if I don't understand what's really motivating me, it's hard to set clear intentions. I can do some. I can certainly set conscious intentions, but I may have subconscious intentions that are working against me at the same time. Did you ever get stuck trying to manifest something? Anybody ever had that problem? Doing treatment, you're doing practice, you're affirming, you're visualing. That's a new word. Visualing. I like that. You're visualing, and you're doing all that stuff, and you maybe you've hired a coach or you've gone to an expensive seminar to learn how to get the 7 tips to success or the 3 ways to change your life or the 12 commandments of don't do this or whatever it is. And you come out feeling all energized and you start to apply it, and nothing happens. And you go, Here's what we tend to do when that happens. We go, what's wrong with me? The answer is nothing's wrong with you, but if you don't deal with the internal stuff that we have maybe isn't in full awareness, it sort of is like it's setting up an obstacle to your success. There are parts of us that are in fear. There are parts of us that in childhood became convinced that I'm not good enough, or I don't deserve this kind of thing, and I never let go of that. I never got to a place where I was able to heal that because I couldn't get to it, probably because I didn't want to. I just wanted to forget about it. But it's still active as an element of my being. So I might set wonderful, grandiose intentions to do all this good work and to be successful and to have amazing relationships and to be a force for good in the world at whatever level I would see that as happening. And it's like I'm walking around and somebody nailed my pant legs to the floor. I can only go so far. You cannot choose your intentions consciously until you become conscious of all of the aspects of yourself. That means self-examination. Well, they say the unexamined life is not worth living. The reason for that is the unexamined life tends to lead us into tragedy. Because so much of what we don't examine is stuff that got put in there when we were very young and didn't understand the world and didn't know our capacities, and we accepted things about ourselves that weren't true. So our choice is limited by the internal beliefs we've already accepted up to this point. Some of us can't even say yes to our good if it's offered to us, because we've decided we can't have it at some level. And it's not anything we're really aware of at the conscious level. He talks about the idea of a splintered personality, and he says it's not easy for a splintered personality to become whole because only some parts of a splintered personality seek wholeness. A splintered personality is where it's become sort of fragmented, and you've accepted at some level that I'm not good enough, and life is tough, and life sucks, and then you die. And other people can have success but not me, or all these different stupid trigger things that we come to accept at different times in our lives, and some of us carry them to the grave, like my dad did. And there are parts of my personality that don't want me to succeed. There are parts of my personality that don't want me to have high-quality, intimate relationships. There are parts of my personality that don't want me to be healthy physically. And you can tell they are because they're the ones that try to lead you astray. Right? How many stocked up on Twinkies when you heard they were going off the market? And you weren't going to use them to caulk your ceiling. America had a bigger concern about Twinkies going off the market than they did about almost anything else that was going on in the country at that point, if you recall. That was not our healthy self speaking out. See, so, life leaves clues. Your inner sense, and he talks about temptation, we're going to get to that in a little bit, the value of temptation, but there are these inner urges and drives that kind of direct it. You set a path, this is where I'm going, this is where I'm going, and then you find yourself over here. Next thing you know, you're at the drive-through window at Burger King. Why am I here? I don't know. So we all, at some level, have a splintered personality. We all, at some level, have these inner kinds of belief structures that hold us back, and we have to pay attention to when those things speak to us, because that's your moment of opportunity to make a shift. And again, they're subconscious, so I can't get there directly. I have to look for the effect of it. The effect of it is I say something really stupid in a relationship. And I don't even know why I said it. The effect of it is I notice that every time I'm about to go on vacation or there's something exciting I'm looking forward to for a big weekend, I get sick on Friday. Or I get sick the day I get back. Or I get sick while I'm gone. See? To let me know that I have decided that I don't deserve whatever it is that I see the vacation as being. We were so looking forward to it, and I've seen couples say, we were so looking for this trip, and we both got sick the day before we were supposed to leave. I would say, don't go to the hospital, go to the therapist. Because that's a sign. That's a clue. And I'm not just if it happens once. I'm usually talking about patterns here. We have ways of communicating to ourselves what we need to know. It just tends to be kind of indirect. So parts of me, although I might want to seek wholeness, are working against me. My dad, something in him would not let him reconcile with his brother. And he probably would have said, well, it was unforgivable what he did or whatever, but that's the surface level. Down deep inside, there was some aspect of him that this would help prove he wasn't lovable. Doesn't make any sense, but these kinds of things don't. They're always irrational when you get to the deepest self. Because it's usually something that happened in our childhood. It's an inner child issue. It's a 3-year-old figuring something out. And when you're 33 looking back at it, or 43 or 63, and it comes to the surface, you say, really? That's crazy. Yeah. It is. But it wasn't crazy when you were 3. Probably served you at some level. So we talked about the difference between 5 sensory and multisensory, and the difference is the multisensory human, as he described it, is someone who is pretty familiar with the inner landscape, doing inner work, contemplation, meditation, we would say prayer treatment, other kinds of things that help guide us within to find out what's really going on. He also touches on the idea of conscious evolution. He says conscious evolution through responsible choice is the accelerated way of evolution in the multisensory personality and in the 5 sensory personality that is becoming multisensory. This is a graph from Barbara Marx Hubbard. It talks about the whole, that's the Big Bang, and then this is how evolution unfolds. And the way evolution unfolds is something doesn't exist, then it does. On every turn of the wheel, okay? There was no universe, there was a universe. There was no earth, there was an earth. There was no life, there was life. There was no animal life, there's animal life. There was no human life, there's human life. And then she goes around this whole co-creation thing and where we're headed. Your personal evolution happens the same way. There was nothing, something wasn't there, then it was. You weren't awake, then you were. You know, you weren't in command of your life, then you were. You weren't able to be loving in a deep relationship, then you were. So evolution usually comes out of the absence of whatever it is that's coming next. So conscious evolution is an intention to evolve as consciously as possible, because otherwise you will evolve unconsciously, but you only use the raw material that you've already implanted in your subconscious, which may not be in your best interest. I want to do this little reading. This is in the chapter on choice. Only through responsible choice can you choose consciously to cultivate and nourish the needs of your soul and to challenge and release the wants of your personality. This is the choice of clarity and wisdom, the choice of conscious transformation. It is the choice of the higher frequency energy currents of love, forgiveness, and compassion. It is the choice to follow the voice of your higher self, your soul. It is the decision to open yourself to the guidance and assistance of your guides and teachers. It is the path that leads to consciously to authentic power. How does this happen? You may be aware that deceiving another person is not in alignment with your soul, but decide to do that anyway in order to gain a profit or save a relationship that you are not yet ready to lose. You may know that the path of compassion is to share your thoughts and actions, and yet decide not to share them because you think that would cost you money or security. When you choose the energy of your soul, when you choose to create with the intention of love, forgiveness, humbleness, and clarity, you gain power. When you choose to learn through wisdom, you gain power. When you choose to create with the energy of your personality, with anger, jealousy, or fear, when you choose to learn through fear and doubt, you lose power. You gain or lose power, therefore, according to the choices that you make. The personality is interested in itself. It likes thrills, so to speak. It's not necessarily responsible, nor caring, nor loving. The soul is the energy of universal love, wisdom, and compassion. It creates with these energies. The personality understands power as external. It perceives in terms of competition, threats, and gains and losses that are measured against those of others. When you align yourself with your personality, you give power to the realm of the five senses, to external circumstances and objects. You disempower yourself. As you grow aware of your spiritual self and origin, your immortalness, and you choose to live according to that first and the physical second, you close the gap that exists between the personality and the soul. You begin to experience authentic power. So every choice we make is motivated either from that five sensory perspective, what he calls the personality level. What personality is really about internal appetites and drives. There's the very primal kinds of appetites, for food and shelter and sex and all that stuff. And then there's others that we have created ourselves in terms of what we think we need to be happy in the world, how relationships need to look in your life and things like that. And what we tend to do is try to manipulate the world around us so that that is so. We also tend to see the power outside of ourselves, so we tend to think what we need to do is learn to cope successfully with that external power. So it's easy to become a victim that way. When we begin to move into the multisensory realm, where we begin to operate more from the inner soul through intuition and other ways of knowing, everything begins to shift. We're able to be stronger. We're able to be more clear. We're able to come from a place of compassion. And doesn't happen overnight. It's not like an on-off switch. It's more like a dimmer, like a rheostat. We tend to start out pretty dim. We do. We just do. When you show up here, you're not that spiritually attuned. People think babies are real spiritual. They're the least spiritual creatures in the human category. They're totally self-absorbed. They don't have the capacity to discern. They're instinctual, and instinct is basically our animal nature, not our spirit nature. I mean, it takes 4 or 5, 6, 10 years to get them to where they can exist in civilization. All spiritual growth is away from personal self-reference. So the child is the perfect egotist. Then you're egocentric. Then you begin to become ethnocentric, where it's all about your family, your tribe, your group identity. That's where most people stop. But then you can continue to move up and become, I call it geocentric or earth-centric. The whole planet is my home. And you can go beyond that to cosmocentric, where I'm a citizen of the universe. And Earth is my neighborhood. See? But spiritual growth is toward that greater idea of self. It might seem like a diminished idea of self. It's not you as the center of the universe, it's you as operating in a universe that you're a part of, and that everything in it is a part of you. So that's what he's talking about here. When we stay in that ego and ethnocentric levels, the world's a jungle. It's tough out there. There's all kinds of competition. There's all kinds of enemies. There's all kinds of opponents. Everything is an obstacle. The journey to wholeness requires that you look honestly, openly, and with courage into yourself, into the dynamics that lie behind what you feel, perceive, value, and how you act. Not just what I do and what I think. What's going on behind that? You know, in The Wizard of Oz, when they pulled back the curtain, when they were there to meet the wizard, you know, the personality was the big masks and blowing smoke and fire. That was all a show. When they pulled back the curtain, there was the man behind it. It was a diminished being. And the wizard's power was coming from a diminished place. So he really couldn't help Dorothy get home. See? He was another disappointment on the pathway. But he was also one of the ones that helped her to learn that she had the power herself. So a lot of us are operating with a diminished self in charge. A lot of people on this planet are. With a diminished self in there kind of running the controls. Operating out of fear, operating out of feeling diminished, operating out of not enough, operating out of separation. When you get to a point of awareness where that becomes a choice, you are now moving into dominion. Because for most of my life, I didn't know there was another choice. I don't think my dad ever figured out that there was another choice. So I came into this teaching and I found out there was another choice. Actually, I found out about it before I came into this teaching a little bit. And you know what? I was happy at first, and I thought, oh crap. Now I got to do it. Yeah, I remember going through this whole period of, oh man. It was so much easier. I wasn't happy, but it was easier to think the power was out there and think, you know, God was up there with his button on the finger on the computer and he could smite me anytime he wanted, and you know. That whole magical sideshow that so many of us live in. But no, once you find out that you have dominion, guess what? That means you have dominion, and you always did. Even when I thought I didn't, I did. But when I find out that I do, it's a lever point, a leverage point into a new realm of possibility. But I still have to do the work to say, okay, what's motivating here in this part of my life that isn't working very well? What's really going on at depth? If you wish the world to become loving and compassionate, become loving and compassionate yourself. If you wish to diminish the fear in the world, diminish your own. And that probably you're sitting there saying, yeah, that makes sense. Try doing it. It's not so easy, is it? It requires courage to stand up to an inner psyche that has been heading in a different direction. Standing up to yourself. But it's your old self. But that's an important thing to remember. Another quick reading. I didn't put my little stickies in, so I have to go. And this is from the chapter on relationships. By the way, the chapter on relationships is excellent, and we're not going to have a lot of time to go over it, but it's very good, and this whole section is really a good section. I just lost. Okay. You learn the roles of love and commitment and trust in making your partnership work. You learn that love alone is not enough, that without trust, you're not able to give and to receive the love that both of you have for each other. You learn that your commitment must be translated into a form that satisfies the needs of both you and your partner. You learn to value the needs of your partner as much as you value your own, because the partnership that you both want requires two healthy and inwardly secure individuals. You learn to trust not only each other, but also your ability to grow together. You learn that you put your partnership more at risk by avoiding that which you are most afraid will destroy it. It is not easy to express what is inside you, especially that which makes you feel vulnerable or painful or angry or upset. These are the emotions that empower words that can do either damage or can do much healing. You learn that sharing your concerns with consideration and the intention to heal and trust in the process is the only appropriate avenue. As you approach your needs with courage instead of fear, you ignite a sense of trust. The true human condition, in its most perfect form, has no secrets. It does not hide, but exists in clear love. You learn not to do stupid and careless things to each other. I know none of you have ever done anything like that. You learn that wanting what you want is not enough, but that you must both want it deeply and create it every day. That you must bring it into being and hold it in being with your intentions. As the consciousness of each of you becomes lighter, your partnership becomes richer. You learn the value of considering the other's position. By becoming the other person, by truly walking into the fears of the other and then returning to your own being again, you open up the conversation to transcend the personal and become healing at the impersonal. This allows you to see each other as spiritual playmates as you work through the areas that require healing in each of you. Even into the toughest moments of your work on feelings of insecurity, you can be light and remind yourself that you are spirits who have taken on the physical experience and have far greater power than you are showing in that moment of weakness. So that's about a conscious approach to relationship, and that chapter is very rich. And I want to close with this idea of temptation. He talks about temptation. Now, I was raised, as most of you know, I was raised Catholic. I went to 12 years of Catholic school, went to Mass at least once a week for all that period, often 7 days a week when I was in my try to be holy period. And we were taught pretty clearly and repeatedly that temptation itself was a sin. They never should have told me that. That it was as much a sin to think about doing something wrong as it was to do it. which just, when I was 7 and I heard that, I just decided, screw it, I'm doing it. And that was a pivotal point in my development, I'll tell you. And I think they still have a chair in Mother Superior's office with my name on it. But he says, what is temptation? Temptation is the universe's compassionate way of allowing you to run through what would be a harmful negative karmic dynamic if you were to allow it to become physically manifest. It's kind of like a place to kind of try stuff out, to maybe get some of your more earthly appetites resolved without having to go out into the world. You know, you can yell at people in a temptation sense in your thought and not actually have to do it in real life. For example, I've had some of my best arguments in my head. Almost always win. In other words, temptation is a thought form that is designed to draw possible negativity from the human energy system without harming others. So the idea is not to see these kinds of thoughts that will arise as being evil or sinful or harmful. It's not something you want to dwell in, but it can give you a space to relieve that energy and shift that energy without doing something that everybody would regret. Okay, so I think that's kind of this is one of the, when I first read this book, this was one of the really big insights for me. I had never heard temptation described that way before. So that's where we are with week 3. Next week we'll do the final section, which I'm going to cheat and see what the name of it is. I think it's called Power. Okay, power's fun. Thank you, and namaste.